I understand you were critical in convincing Rivian to build its plants in Georgia. Talk to us about how you helped align the interests of the company and the state.
Well, I got to give credit to the bipartisan state leadership to attract this investment. A big team effort and a lot of folks who deserve credit for this. I was involved earlier this year in the effort to broker a settlement of a trade dispute between SK Innovation and LG over electric vehicle battery intellectual property. And that dispute at the ITC threatened SK's $2.6 billion battery plant in Commerce, Georgia, which is the largest foreign direct investment in Georgia's history. And lithium-ion batteries and heavy electric vehicle batteries being very heavy, when you have a major manufacturing facility for the batteries in your state, you're a much more attractive site for investment for the automotive manufacturers. Georgia is rapidly becoming a world-leading hub in renewable energy, clean tech, and electric vehicles. We have, as I mentioned, that battery production facility with thousands of jobs in Commerce, Georgia. A little known fact is that Georgia hosts the largest solar module production facility in the Western Hemisphere in Dalton, Georgia. That's a Hanwha Q-Cells facility. We have the Kia Motors plant out in West Point. They're adding EV lines over the next several years. And now this $5 billion investment by Rivian. Georgia will be producing electric vehicles sold across the country and around the world. And of course, with the fourth largest deep water port in the country, the busiest airport in the world, all of our logistics capacity, Georgia is emerging as a powerhouse in this sector, not just nationally, but globally.
As you said, this Rivian deal alone will create thousands of new green energy jobs. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Rivian asked for in return for coming to Georgia and what kind of incentives the state provided?
Well, I'll defer to state leaders to brief on the state level incentives that have been offered to secure this investment. My involvement really on the front end in helping to ensure that that SK Innovation electric vehicle battery production facility was not closed to make Georgia broadly an attractive site for investment in related industries and in the broader sector. Again, when you have that kind of battery production capacity in your state, you're going to attract automotive assembly. And that's what's happened here. Look, I'd also note that in the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that we passed earlier this year, there's significant investment in building out electric vehicle charging infrastructure nationwide, as well as research and development. 68 of my colleagues in the U.S. Senate, Democrats and Republicans, uniting to support that legislation, demonstrating to the country and to the world that we're still capable in the Congress of putting the national interest ahead of partisan interest. But we in Georgia are all excited by and applauding this decision by Rivian to invest in our state. We're grateful for the investment and the thousands of jobs that it will create in coming years. And also, this is an investment in our environment. This means that we're going to be able to scale our national production of electric vehicles more swiftly, deploy them more swiftly, grow that fleet more swiftly. That means we'll be able to drive down greenhouse gas emissions and meet our generational obligation to accelerate this transition to clean energy.
So what are the conditions that make Georgia attractive? And I'm curious if you think that means California, where, of course, this is was the original home of Tesla. Of course, Tesla is now moving in part to Texas. What makes California less attractive than a state like Georgia?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to sing Georgia's praises for this audience. Let me highlight again our extraordinary logistics capacity. The Port of Savannah, which right now is undergoing a significant expansion, the Savannah Harbor Expansion Project, is, depending upon how you count, the third or fourth busiest container port in the country. It's the fastest growing. It has the largest single container terminal in the country. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is the single busiest airport in the world. So we've got all of that logistics capacity, and we're building out logistics capacity swiftly. We have massive research and development capabilities. Georgia Tech, for example, which is leading in polysilicon research and research associated with clean energy, battery technology, that produces not just the tech itself, but also a highly skilled workforce that can be involved at every step of the value chain for these companies, support with engineering, support with developing the software that powers these tools and assembly lines. And then what we're really seeing emerge in Georgia is the synergies when you get deep investment in these specialized sectors concentrated geographically. I mentioned the Kia Motors plant out in West Point. There's a whole ecosystem of vendors and suppliers supporting those activities along that I-85 corridor extending from eastern Alabama into western Georgia. When you have the battery production facility, we're seeing other suppliers and vendors emerge around commerce. The solar module production facility I mentioned in Dalton, Georgia, is rapidly growing as one of the preeminent places in the world for solar manufacturing. So Georgia has a lot to offer: a skilled workforce, great logistics, links to the rest of the world, and a concentration of firms in these critical sectors.
So on that note, I mean, what other companies are you in talks with? Do you plan to convince other legacy automakers, for example, or energy companies to make a home in Georgia?
Well, let me give you an example. I was on an official visit to South Korea a few weeks ago, meeting with Korean industrial leaders and promoting Georgia as a site for FDI. And to give you a sense of the possibilities, I've introduced the major solar energy legislation in the Senate, which will create manufacturing incentives to attract a fully integrated, vertically integrated solar supply chain to the United States, from polysilicon to ingots to wafers, cells, modules. There are billions of dollars that are awaiting enactment of that legislation, billions of dollars already on their way to the United States in the solar sector. I am making a push across the country and internationally to attract more firms to Georgia. And I would welcome interest from other automakers, and they should reach out to me in my office if you have any interest. We'll go out of our way to make the case for Georgia and to connect you with all the right players in our state to let you know what incentives are available and how you can connect with workforce, innovation, research and development, and logistics in the great state of Georgia.
Still, Georgia is no stranger to losing business over hard right politics. How worried are you about potentially lost business over voting rights and restrictions?
Well, look, I'm very worried about the impact of these voting restrictions on the ability of every eligible voter to vote. And that's why it's vital that in the United States Senate, we restore and strengthen the Voting Rights Act. That's a core legislative priority for me. My colleague, Senator Reverend Warnock, gave a powerful speech on the Senate floor yesterday calling on Congress to act. It did not used to be a partisan issue. This is the Voting Rights Act. It needs to be fully restored and strengthened to meet the challenge posed by these partisan efforts to restrict ballot access. That's an ongoing fight. It's a historic fight. I got my start in public service working as a very young man for Congressman John Lewis. It was a half century ago, but he had his skull fractured marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, daring to demand the right to vote for Black Americans in the American South. And we have an obligation, a historic obligation, to restore and strengthen the VRA and ensure that every eligible American voter has ballot access. That's why I introduced the Right to Vote Act, which would enshrine for the first time in federal law an affirmative right to vote and give any voter the ability to challenge state or local laws that diminish their access to the ballot without cause.
Will the Senate pass anything before the recess, Senator Ossoff?
Look, those discussions are ongoing and vigorous. And in fact, I'm going to leave this interview, go and vote on the floor, and jump right back into those meetings.